Hello guys, Joker the Fool here, back at it again, and this is the review of Dreamgirl. This is the first issue of Dreamgirl, Sleeper Agent from Genuine Comics. Of course, I've talked about Perfect 10, mostly from Genuine Comics, but there's a bunch of other stuff that Dave Brink is up to with his imprint. Now, there are some problems with buying these comics from his store if you are an American citizen, which most likely you are, but hopefully those issues get panned out. And there's always, when he's doing the campaigns, I believe he works with Critical Blast, so if you are on a campaign and you can pick this up as an add-on, I definitely recommend this because, of course, we've got Dave Brink as the writer on this book. Jim Jimenez and editor Messas do the pencils and inks for both of these as two parts, but it's also a really consistent art style is because you've got King Bola as the colorist, and of course the lettering is done by HDE. He's done lettering for basically all the Genuine comic stuff, and this is a really good introduction to the character of Dreamgirl. Of course, she's got a name that really cues you into her character. This is something that people really like with comic books, like classic comics. Like, you know, the name of the character really clues you into what the character's all about. You know what Superman's shtick is by his name, Batman's shtick, Power Girl, those sorts of things. Dream Girl makes sense that she's a character whose superpowers involves dreams. So her powers, she goes into people's dreams basically to eliminate these demons. And as you can see, the book just really starts off basically instantly her going into a man's dream and fighting demons. And of course, it has some issues. There's some stuff that goes wrong, but she's able to win it at the end of the day. And there's a lot of stuff that happens that's mentioned in this book that if you've read Perfect 10, especially like I have, you'll be cued in because you see a lot of that stuff gets introduced, like the names of groups, the term metanormals. But if you're just going into this blind, it's not so essential to the plot. Dave does a really good job at working it into a story that's pretty understandable, especially if you've read other superhero comics, that it doesn't really throw you off or it doesn't really make you pause all that much. So this is done really well, and this art is absolutely fantastic. The coloring especially, this coloring just makes it really pop out as really good comic book art. The page layouts are done fantastically. There aren't really any epic spreads, so this is like the closest you're going to get to like an epic 2-page spread or anything like that, but it's mostly these multi-panel page layouts, and they all look really, really good. So when you're reading this book, it's all done and presented really well, and there is a lot of action. So the action scenes in this are really punchy, and it's mostly basically just one big action scene and the fallout from that. That's basically the story, and Dave uses that to introduce the character of Dreamgirl and then basically set up what her character is going to be going through in these sequential issues, which I'm not sure if I'll be able to get, because I mentioned the shipping issues that he's having. Hopefully we'll pan those out. I'll be able to get more of these issues, because Dreamgirl is a really good story. Of course, you've got the character Ajax. He's got his own stories as well. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on with Genuine Comics, and this story definitely slots in pretty nicely with what I know that has been established and all the other things that are getting established in Genuine Comics. And of course, these character designs are absolutely fantastic. Like, you got Ajax having a really cool character like style or character design here. Of course, you gotta love Dreamgirl's character design, and this is really the case with basically all the women in Genuine Comics, that they actually look like women. They've got these very feminine forms. People love Power Girl and Wonder Woman for a reason. Dave knows this, and this is why he has his character designs in these very particular ways. Absolutely love it. And of course, like the monsters and demons that they're fighting up against look really cool as well. So you get that classic comic book experience. You see some of that onomatopoeia that just reminds you of like the best stuff from comic books, like reading Battle Beast. It just gives you that feel like of just like you're reading a nice, classic, gritty comic book. And you really get that feeling when you're reading this issue of Dreamgirl, basically any stuff from Genuine Comics, I would say. So like I said, this slots in really nicely. It's its own contained story that introduces the character of Dreamgirl within the context of the Genuine verse. So there are some terms that, like I said, you'll see like metanormals and Division M, and that might not make sense if you're picking this up and you're reading this completely blind going into the Genuine verse. You'll have a little bit more insight if you've read Perfect 10 or maybe even Earthling, but especially Perfect 10, because Perfect 10 is a pretty beefy introduction to the Genuine Verse, in my opinion. That's what from what I know. But as you're familiar with the Genuine Verse, this book's going to be a bit more digestible when those things are mentioned. But like I said, Dave does a really good job at structuring this story around stuff that makes sense if you are familiar with fiction. Of course, it's a bit of a fantastical story with a superpowered being that fights demons in people's dreams, but that's a pretty digestible story. And then he links that with stuff from his own universe and characters from his own universe, and this culminating in one action scene. Basically, the story is just one big action scene where she's helping this man right here fight the demons that are plaguing him. And that is the main shtick of this first issue. And then, of course, the cooldown from that is used to set up what her story is going to be going forward. So it's done really well. It has a great ending, but it feels like a very self-contained story. So it doesn't end on this really big cliffhanger. It ends on like, I want to know what happens next, but you get enough story there where you're satisfied with what happens. So that all in all makes this a really good first issue. Art feels really consistent, even though it was done by two artists, I should say, who did the pencils and inks divided up between part 1 and part 2. So half of this book was done by Jim Jimenez, and the other half was done by Eder Messias, but the book still feels really consistent, and a lot of that has to do with the fantastic coloring and the fantastic lettering. And of course, Dave really knows what he does when he writes these stories, so the layouts are naturally going to be good because the scenes that are being depicted are scenes that make sense and have great grounding, especially in the context of a superhero book. It's not like grounded like a real gritty, like realistic story. It's still fantastical. It's still superhero. It's still comic book. So it's going to have, like I said, these fantastical elements, but it's done in a way that feels very digestible. Like I said, even with these very specific in-universe mentions, it all flows together really well. It has a great structure, and it's a really fun comic to read, which is what you really can only ask for when you're reading a comic, that is fun, enjoyable, because that's the reason why people read comic books like this. The reason why people go to their LCS is they just want to read something that's fun, enjoyable, they can turn their brain off, and they can have a little bit of fun for 20, 30, however many minutes it takes to read one of these issues. And Dave really did a great job, along with everybody else at Genuine Comics. So Genuine Comics definitely still has my love and admiration for all the great work that they do. Like I said, especially Dave Frank. So be sure to go follow him, back his campaigns if you can. And if you're at a place where you can go to the Genuine Comics store and you can buy books from him, I highly recommend you pick up this one. Check out Perfect 10. Check out the other stuff because he does fantastic work, he and the artist that he works with. But that's all I have for this specific review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Joker is out.